It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon at the city's most well-known hospital. The waiting room was busy, but nothing out of the ordinary until a young woman, 7 months pregnant, staggered through the doors. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven, and she clutched her belly as if every step was a battle. She pleaded for help, her voice trembling, but instead of rushing to her aid, the staff hesitated. Eyes glanced at clipboards, whispers passed behind the reception desk, and seconds felt like hours. The other patients watched in stunned silence as she slowly sank to the floor, her cries echoing in the sterile room. No one could understand why a place meant to save lives seemed frozen in indifference. What they didn't know was that this woman's husband was not just any man. He was one of the most powerful billionaires in the city. And at that very moment, he was only minutes away. In 10 minutes, everything in that hospital would change: jobs, reputations, and the quiet comfort of those who thought they could look away. But for now, the clock was ticking, and the woman on the floor was running out of time. The woman's name was Emily, and this wasn't her first visit to the ER during her pregnancy. She had been feeling sharp pains all morning, but convinced herself it was just stress. Her husband, Daniel, had been out of town closing an important business deal when she called him, her voice barely holding together. He told her to go straight to the hospital, promising he would be there as soon as possible. Emily trusted that. Once she arrived, the doctors and nurses would take over. Instead, she found herself sitting, then kneeling, and now lying on the cold tile floor. Ignored behind the reception desk, the nurse kept tapping on her computer, muttering about missing paperwork. A doctor glanced her way but turned back to speak with another patient. Emily could hear snippets of the waiting rooms murmur someone saying it was just another case. Another whispering that maybe she's exaggerating. What none of them realized was the storm that was about to hit. Daniel had the kind of influence that could shift entire boardrooms with a single phone call. As he sped toward the hospital, his mind was racing not only with fear for his wife, an unborn child, but with a growing fury. Emily tried to shift her position on the floor, but the pain shot through her like a knife. She glanced toward the clock on the wall, each second dragging, each breath harder to take. The receptionist avoided her eyes now, typing with an almost deliberate slowness. In the corner, an elderly couple whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, but unsure if stepping in would make things worse. A young man in a hoodie stood up halfway, then sat back down when the nurse gave him a sharp look in another part of the city. Daniel's black sedan cut through traffic, the driver weaving expertly between cars. Daniel was on the phone, calling every contact he could think of. His personal assistant had already reached out to the hospital board. But Daniel didn't want to wait for meetings or protocols. This was about Emily. About their child? Inside the ER, a junior nurse hesitated near the hallway door, glancing at Emily before being pulled away by a senior staff member. There was talk about policy and liability, words Emily could barely process through. The haze of pain. Somewhere in the background, a monitor beeped steadily. Like a countdown no one wanted to acknowledge. Emily's breathing grew shallow, each inhale a struggle as her hand pressed against her belly. She could feel the baby shifting, an urgency in the movement that made her panic rise. Around her, the room seemed colder, quieter, though she could sense the nervous glances from the other patients. No one dared to step forward, not with the staff watching every move. The receptionist's fingers tapped on the keyboard, the sound sharp and unnerving in the silence. Outside, tires screeched against the pavement as Daniel's car came to a halt in front of the hospital. He didn't wait for the driver to open. The door striding inside, his presence alone seemed to draw all eyes. He scanned the room once and then he saw her lying on the floor, her face pale and damp with sweat. His jaw tightened. The doctor at the counter started to speak, but Daniel's voice cut through the air, low but dangerous. People in the waiting area shifted, sensing that something was about to happen. A tension, thick as a storm cloud, settled. Over the room, Emily reached toward him, her fingers trembling. In that instant, the seconds felt endless, everyone waiting to see what he would do next. Daniel moved toward Emily, but before he could reach her, 2 security guards stepped into his path. Their sudden appearance made the room go silent. One of them, a tall man with a clipped tone, said there were orders not to interfere with ongoing hospital procedures. The words sounded rehearsed, almost like they had been waiting for him. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. This wasn't just neglect. Someone was deliberately keeping them from helping her. Emily's voice broke through the tension. Weak but urgent. "Daniel, something's wrong." Her grip on his hand was cold, her fingers trembling. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it ignited something in him that was far more dangerous than anger. From behind the reception desk, the senior nurse made a quick call, speaking in a hushed voice. The doctor who had been ignoring Emily earlier suddenly disappeared through a side door, avoiding Daniel's gaze entirely. In the corner, the young man in the hoodie who had been watching stood again, pulling out his phone and recording the. Seeing Danielle realized this was no longer just about Emily's treatment. There was something the hospital didn't want exposed, and in that moment, the stakes skyrocketed. Daniel stepped around the guards, his voice rising, not in a shout, but with a sharp authority that left no room for argument. "Move, something." In his tone made them hesitate just long enough for him to kneel beside Emily. He lifted her gently, his arms steady around her back, and turned toward the treatment rooms. When the senior nurse tried to block his way, Daniel pulled out his phone, made one call, and within seconds, the hospital director appeared, looking pale and nervous. The director's arrival changed everything. Orders were barked, staff scrambled, and a gurney was rushed in. Emily was finally wheeled toward emergency care, Daniel's hand never leaving hers. But even in the chaos, Daniel noticed the receptionist slip a small envelope to one of the security guards. His instincts told him this wasn't over. Minutes later, a doctor emerged to say Emily and the baby were stable. Relief washed over Daniel, but before he could breathe easy, the young man in the hoodie approached. He showed Daniel the video he'd recorded, clear footage of the staff ignoring Emily, the security interference, and the envelope exchange. That's when Daniel realized the truth. This wasn't just negligence. It was part of something far bigger. Daniel took the young man's phone and saved the video, thanking him quietly. With evidence in hand, he made another call, this time to his legal team. Within the hour, the hospital's board members arrived, summoned by Daniel's influence. The envelope was recovered, revealing an attempt to cover up a serious internal violation. Those who had ignored Emily's pleas were immediately removed from their posts. The atmosphere in the ER shifted. Staff who had once avoided eye contact now moved with urgency and care, aware that every action was being watched. Emily, resting in her hospital room with her newborn safe beside her, looked at Daniel with tired eyes full of gratitude. He brushed her hair back gently and promised, "No one will ever treat you like that again." The young man in the hoodie stopped by to check on her before leaving, his quiet bravery having changed the course of the day. In the days that followed, the incident made headlines, not for the scandal alone, but for the reminder it gave that every patient deserves dignity, compassion, and immediate care. For Daniel and Emily, the memory of that day would remain, not as a story of power, but as a fight for what was right.